Hello, everybody, and welcome to the WastED webinar. My name is Garnet, my pronouns are he, him, and I am the city coordinator for leftovers in Edmonton. Fun fact, I got my second dose of the vaccination yesterday, and I'm still recovering from that. So if I'm not fully on point today, I apologize, but all should be groovy gravy. If you haven't gotten the second dose yet, it is a doozy, folks, let me tell you. Our WastED webinar explores food waste in Edmonton. This is the 5th episode. Last month, we spoke with Operation Fruit Rescue Edmonton. And a fun fact, the WastED webinar is now available as a podcast, which is fantastic. Thanks very much to our guy, Dwayne, for putting that together. It's available on all your regular streaming platforms. And in the podcast and in the webinar, we seek to collaborate with different organizations and bring these conversations to the service that Leftovers is having on a regular basis, and build community, utilize our hive mind to take action and make positive change in our community. I think that we have slightly lower attendance for this one than we have had for our previous webinars, probably because of the gorgeous weather outside and as well the easing of restrictions. But that means we can have a little more intimate of a conversation. With that, I'd just like to do a quick treaty acknowledgement. I'm here, and I think most of us are tuning in from Treaty 6 territory, which is the traditional land of the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, and Nakota Sioux, as well as many other Indigenous nations that have been on this land for thousands and thousands of years. And as we chat with Blush Lane today, I'd like us to consider who is having access to this healthy and affordable food, and where is healthy and affordable food not present, which is certainly the case on Indigenous reserves. And if anybody is interested in Indigenous food systems and to learn more about the activism and the work doing there, there's a new documentary that just came out called Food for the Rest of Us. So I'd highly recommend that. With that, I will introduce our guest for today. Michelle Austin is the sustainability lead at SPUD and Blush Lane Organics. Welcome, Michelle.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Absolute
pleasure. And you're tuning in from Vancouver, is that right?
I am, yes. SPUD.ca is based out of Vancouver, but we have a warehouse in Calgary. And of course, our Blush Lane stores are throughout Calgary and Edmonton.
Awesome. Could you just give us a little bit of history on Blush Lane and how it started and how SPUD fits into that story?
Yeah, definitely. So Blush Lane started in 2004. It was started by Rob and Xenia Horrocks. They started with a mission really to bring sustainable food to their community. And they started with, they actually still own and started with an organic orchard that's actually based in BC, but it's kind of sitting right on the border between BC and Alberta. And they're a certified organic farm. They mainly do fruit trees, such as apples and peaches. And then they were supplying that to the Calgary Farmers Market. Since 2006, they've expanded to a couple different retail stores. There's a few in Calgary and one in Edmonton. And then in 2017, Blush Lane combined with SPUD.ca, which stands for Sustainable Produce Urban Delivery. SPUD kind of is a reflection on our history. We started with delivering small potatoes on a bicycle, which is where the name SPUD comes from. But yeah, Blush and SPUD combined forces, the idea being of creating kind of like an ecosystem of sustainable food. So providing a retail environment, but also an online option for customers, and then being able to integrate the two by being able to pick up your SPUD order at the retail stores or just having it delivered to your home. So now they kind of work in unison, and yeah, really excited about how they've grown and developed over the past few years.
That's really neat. I didn't know that Blush Lane started as an orchard. Does a lot of the food at Blush Lane and SPUD come from the orchard, or is that is that still a significant part of the business?
Yeah, definitely still source for them when we can, when it's in season. They also do some dried fruit, like they have apple slices that we can offer when those are available as well. But yeah, definitely when they're in season, they're available both online and in store.
Excellent. And Blush Lane being a smaller, more trying to source local and sustainable ingredients, do you have some favorite items that are available at Blush Lane?
Yeah, what's great about Blush Lane that kind of differentiates it from other retailers is we love to work with very small vendors or very local vendors that maybe don't have as much opportunity at other grocery stores because they're not as well established, they're not as big, but this is really where we find very unique vendors. So one of my favorites is it's called Bottle None, and they offer shampoo and conditioner bars instead of like a liquid coming out of like a bottle, which is great if you're looking for like a zero waste alternative. I also find it like helps, you don't use as much with a bar or a soap, or at least I don't. So those are really great products. We also work with some awesome bakeries. There's one called Prairie Mill Co., as well as Rustic Sourdough Bread. And they are local as well. And they do a lot of like local ingredients and natural ingredients, like they use honey as a sweetener. So they're awesome if you're looking for some awesome bread, tastes good, it's local and full of healthy ingredients that you'll recognize.
Yeah, I love that. I believe that Prairie Mill is also a leftovers donor in Calgary, in addition to Blush Lane. So yeah, fun connections there. While we're on that subject, I want to dive a little bit into that. How does the food get to Blush Lane? Is there a central warehouse? I mean, SPUD would have some kind of warehouse, but do some of the local products also go to just like, would a local producer drop off directly, or do they drop off the warehouse? How does that work?
Yeah, I believe the majority of the food comes from the SPUD warehouse. So we'll, because we share a lot of the same inventory, the Blush Lane stores will kind of just like order through SPUD. But there is the opportunity for vendors to come directly to the stores as well. You know, with some of them, they're so close by that network is able to happen. And that's one of the great things about local food. You can create those like super simple connections between the producer and the retailer.
Love it. I love simplicity. So you are the sustainability lead at SPUD. What does that entail, and how did you get to that point? How did you develop that interest?
Yeah, sure. So the sustainability position kind of changes, or it doesn't necessarily change, but the focus can kind of change. You know, sustainability is such a big kind of umbrella word, and it means so many different things. So we try to tackle kind of different impact areas underneath sustainability. So that ranges from looking at packaging and how we can reduce our single-use packaging, or how can we provide, you know, more recycling or compostable options. We look at the social side of sustainability, looking at how we can give back to our community. We do a lot of work around, you know, looking at our GHG emissions and how we can address that. And then another big part of at least the work that I've done with SPUD, and now just recently with Blush Lane, is we're a certified B Corp company. So this is a certification that a business can get where you are assessed on your social and environmental processes, policies, programs, and then you're kind of given a score based on how you perform in their assessment. And if you meet a certain threshold, you're given the certification to say, this third party has said this business is sustainable. It's kind of the same way as an organic certification is for food. This is kind of a certification for business. So SPUD has been one for years, and Blush Lane, you know, does a lot of the same sustainability initiatives. So we've just started to bring them under the umbrella as well. So I've been working to kind of bring them into the certification, which has been super exciting. In terms of my experience in sustainability, my background is in development studies, which is kind of like a frustrating word in and of itself, but it was looking at inequality throughout the world and looking at forms of aid and why things work and why things don't. So that's kind of where my interest started, and then this pairing interest of environmentalism as well. And I found that the food system was a way that you could work on helping people with these issues of inequality and poverty and other challenges, as well as these environmental challenges with you know, with our ecosystem, and food brought those two together. So if we can kind of fix the food system, then we can work on both of those challenges together. And that's kind of driven me down this road of food sustainability, which also includes food security and all those important topics.
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to dive into the social side of that, but I think for now, maybe we'll tag into the end there if we have time. But for now, I think let's focus on the food waste aspect, because that's our main topic of conversation for today. And on that, how does Blush Lane as a market address the issue of food in the retail level?
Yeah, food waste we kind of look at it in two kind of streams. We look at prevention and we look at diversion. So in terms of preventing food waste, we look at, we use, you know, sophisticated technology to look at what's been purchased in the past, so that what we're bringing into our stores is enough to kind of respond to that historical understanding of what's been purchased, so we're not over ordering. Then we do kind of more simple things, like we are tracking the perishability of products, and when we find it's kind of reaching its peak freshness, we'll put discounts on or promotions. You know, it's still fresh and good to eat, we're kind of see that date looming, so we put it on discount to help move the product. And then, you know, sometimes we work with our own employees and say, like, do you want to have this on a discount, or do you want to take this home, or whatever it may be. And then in terms of diversion, we work with leftovers, of course. So we've been working with you for quite a while, and we set you up with our edible food. In terms of our inedible food, we'll work we've worked with farmers in the past of saying, like, can you feed this to your pigs or to your whatever it may be, or we'll just compost it with our local system. So that's how we kind of look at it through those two channels, and try to create, you know, as little waste as possible to begin with.
Awesome. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, Blush Lane has been one of the I think maybe the largest donor for leftovers in Edmonton last year at something like 26,000 pounds, which given that we're picking up every day from Blush Lane, I think that's, you know, a pretty respectable amount, and we're really ensuring that goes to the highest value, and it's very, very much appreciated by the service agencies we take it to. It's one of the most highly valued donations we get, because it is really quality stuff. So that's great in terms of what Blush Lane does. Do you think that other superstores or other supermarkets across the food chain, do they have similar practices, and where might they be lacking relative to Blush Lane?
Yeah, food waste is kind of like an interesting history. I think in the past, food retailers have been reluctant or nervous to donate food to food aid organizations out of concern of someone getting sick from food that they would provide. With time, we've seen this nice kind of like social movement of like people feeling better about doing that. There's now like an act protecting retailers, saying if you're giving this in good faith and you know, without negligence for the quality of the product, you will be protected if you donate it. So I think retailers have been really effective at that. The challenge with any grocery store, I think it's really a team effort. You'll have, you know, these policies in place or systems to prevent or divert food waste, but if not every team member is on board to check date codes and, you know, put things aside for food rescue organizations, or if something does go bad, like separating the packaging from the bad product and putting the product in the compost, like it really takes a team. So if that's not embedded in the culture of the company, you won't see this kind of success with food waste mitigation that you'll maybe see in other stores like Blush Lane, where it's really a part of what we do because sustainability is so embedded in our brand.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good perspective. And there's such a nuanced part there to building a culture within an organization, but I certainly see how Blush Lane does have that centered. Is there anything specific that Blush Lane and/or SPUD has done towards like promoting that culture?
Um, I think it's like something you need to talk about often. Like, it's not kind of like a side of the desk conversation. It's like, this is who we are and we value it as much as we value like providing local and organic food to our customers. I think we really see, there's a slogan in the that the B Corp certification uses, which is use business as a force for good. And so I think we really embody that in SPUD and at Blush Lane, that we're not just there to sell things, we're there to be a part of a movement. And for us, that's a movement around a better food system. So I think with that in mind, everything that we do in the store is intentional, and every team player feels like they're a part of this movement. So I think it's who we bring on within the company already has that passion within them, and then just like allow them to practice that through whatever their position is with a company.
Great, thanks. So those are some of the opportunities that you've taken advantage of as an organization. What are some of the challenges that Blush Lane and other food retailers might experience in trying to reduce food waste?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest ones with any retailer or someone selling food in a traditional brick and mortar store is you have this perception when people come into a store of something looks good or desirable when it's in kind of like this big heaping pile. Sometimes if there's like one orange left, you're kind of like, oh, what's wrong with that orange? Or like, that doesn't look as good. But if it's in like this glowing pile of oranges, you're attracted to buying it. And that really hinders a retailer's ability to minimize food waste as much as possible. So we do try to, like I said, we use technology to track purchase history so that we're not over ordering as much as we can, but we also still deal with that challenge of display and trying to move product without wasting any. So that's definitely a challenge. That's something, an awesome thing about being an online retailer with SPUD.ca is we don't have to deal with that kind of display of food. You're ordering online, you're clicking add to cart, and then we have our own warehouse where we can like specifically order that amount of food into the warehouse for the next day, because we already know how many people will be ordering for the next day, for the day after that, and etc. So we found the advantages in online retail, and we're still working through the in-store challenges that are faced by retailers across the country and around the world.
Do you think there's anything consumers can do to address that? Like, as a consumer, if I go into a grocery store, is there anything that we can do to do that, or is that just human behavior?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like I don't know what to say for that, actually. Like I think if there's like few left over, I don't know if you taking the last one would really be enough to signal to the retailer that they can put less on the shelf. I think maybe calling in, emailing, like reaching out to your retailer and saying, I'm looking for like imperfect produce, or I'm looking for discounts for food that's going off, or just trying to find those channels of where a retailer would be able to specifically address your request and be able to record your demand for food waste solutions. I feel like maybe that would be more effective. It's hard when you're just going into a store and like saying, how can I purchase differently? I don't know if that's, again, going back to kind of like tracking, I don't know if that can be tracked necessarily. And I think that's unfortunately how things move or change.
Yeah, certainly. And I'm sure there is just like some inherent human behavior, and we walk in was like, oh, the tomatoes are in abundance. I love tomatoes. I will be attracted to those tomatoes rather than seeing a lonely pear that's all on its own.
Yeah, and like for anyone who's listening in the webinar too, like if you have any ideas, put it in the chat. I'd be curious to just put it out as a question for everyone else.
What are some of the biggest misconceptions people have about your work, and what do you wish more people knew?
There's so many good conversations around sustainability. You could, kind of tackle any of them. One that we've really been trying to work on lately is around local food. I think it's often, people see it as just like this feel-good term that's like, oh, buy local, because it's like this kind of like nice concept of buying local food. But the power of local food and the impact that you have by buying local is so extensive. It goes from you're helping your local community, which I think is the obvious one, but it really does have an impact. You can see studies of more revenue being recirculated within community if you buy local than if you buy a product from abroad. You also have benefits to yourself. There's been studies that show that if you buy local food, it potentially could be more nutritious for you, because the produce, for example, is staying on the trees longer, it's staying on the bush longer, so it's can ripen more and gain more nutrients. You can also explore diversifying your diet. I know that when I go into farmers markets, I'll see a vegetable or something sometime and be like, I have no idea what that is, but I'm going to try it because it looks so cool, or this farmer is telling me how to cook with it. And I think that doesn't necessarily come with, going into a bigger grocery store. It also is really impactful for food waste. If you think about food not having to travel as far, you have less time or less variables involved in it getting bumped or bruised or damaged in any way. And it also has to do with less packaging waste. If you don't have to have, often the argument is, oh, well, saran wrap or sticky wrap around a cucumber is necessary because it extends the shelf life by 15 days. And yes, that's important for food waste for like a long supply chain. But if you had a very hyper local producer of cucumbers, you wouldn't need the plastic wrap to preserve it for that many days. So just all these amazing benefits that come from local food that I think is just not as well known. And we just want to like yell it from the mountaintops, because it's we could really change the food system by shopping local.
So a thought just occurred to me that's something I'm challenged with, and you may have a different perspective being in Vancouver, but in Edmonton, we can only grow for like 5 months of the year. There's like 1, maybe 2 harvests we can get in. And then there's like such a long period where the food it's difficult to find fresh local food, and preservation is a huge part of that. But yeah, just kind of thoughts that come to my mind as you say that, the challenges of eating local in Edmonton in December and February.
Yeah, definitely. And that's like just a reality of where we live. I think, like you said, Vancouver's a bit more forgiving with that, or it allows for a greater growing season. I think, and that's something I'm really trying to work on too, and I've been horrible at working on it, but I'm trying to, when you get fresh fruit in the summer, trying to practice jarring or canning, and then you'll have it throughout the winter. And there's a lot of root vegetables that can be preserved through the winter, or like apples can last an insane amount of time if preserved properly. So there's definitely, reality constraints. And that's what we say a lot of the times with our business as well. Like, although we'd love to be local for everything, unfortunately right now nobody's figured out how to grow bananas in BC or in Alberta, and that's just a reality of the food system. But I think where the opportunity is there to buy local, try to kind of pivot towards supporting your community.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not about the absolutes, it's about the intention and taking those easy wins when we can, wherever we can.
Yeah, when you can. Like, I understand there's financial barriers and access issues and things like that, and that's going into a different conversation, but if you can, try.
Something else you touched on is the relationship between packaging and food waste. I'm curious how that shows up for SPUD, being an online delivery. Are you still able to keep packaging to a minimum?
We definitely try. It's challenging because we don't have, complete control over who we work with. And there is always that balance between packaging and food waste. You'll find often in the grocery store, and I'm sure we'll dive into this later, but there's this packaging type, technical or a semi-technical term is like a stand-up multi-laminate pouch. You'll often see them, they like can sit upright and have a zippy top. And those
like granola bags.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
or like dried fruit or anything like that, you'll find them kind of growing in the grocery store. As you walk down the aisles, you'll see it's actually very common. But that packaging type currently is not recycled or able to be recycled in most municipal recycling systems. But it's very effective at keeping food fresh or preserving food. So going back to that like conversation around like which one is best, it can be a challenging conversation. So we do have a program set up to help retailers that use that type of packaging. And we do work with some vendors who have products in reusable packaging, and we'll just ask customers, when you're done with the product, rinse it out, dry it out, put it back in your SPUD bin, and then when we drop off your next grocery order, we'll pick up the reusable packaging, send it back to the vendor, they'll fill it up and we'll resell it, which is another amazing quality of local food. I don't know if that system would be possible if our vendors lived across the country.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's something that we touched on briefly when we were talking with the city of Edmonton on the WastED webinar. What's it? The extended producer responsibility? Is that the right term? Yeah, very cool idea. And I hope that it kind of takes over our system in general to have extended producer responsibility on packaging.
Yeah, it's something we have set up in.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we do have it set up in BC, and it's also very eye-opening to see, you know, as a retailer having to track your packaging or the packaging of your vendors. It's a real wake-up call. So I've been watching the Alberta conversation, and we'll see if they join some of the other provinces with that program.
Great. I hope so. I would have to take this opportunity to ask how Blush Lane's experience with leftovers has been. Any feedback, any highs, lows? You've been working with us for several years now, so what's it been like?
Yeah, I reached out actually to all of our store managers to say, how's working with leftovers? What feedback do you have? And all of them only had good things to say. They've seen the passion of your team and feel really comfortable with you guys and proud of working with you. I think a lot of them also mentioned just the historical relationship of working with leftovers. Like I think they mentioned 7 or 8 years working, and maybe you can have a better idea of when that relationship started. But I think that history really speaks to how well we've worked together, and yeah, we're quite proud to be a partner of Leftovers.
Thanks. Yeah, maybe I was fishing for that. But yeah, no, that's great. And certainly Blush Lane has been a fantastic partner. I'm not sure how long they've been partnered down in Calgary, but I believe that ever since Blush Lane, or ever since Leftovers came to Edmonton in 2018, I think, Blush Lane has been a partner here. And just this past year, we went from picking up only on weekends to picking up every day. And yeah, it's so much appreciated, and the staff who we interact with have been fantastic as well.
I will pass that back to them.
Great, thanks. I'm curious if you interact with other supermarkets, and is food waste like a topical conversation when you do?
I haven't as much interacted with other retailers. I don't know if my other team necessarily does as well. I'd say, yeah, kind of what I was saying before. I think it comes back to if it's a part of what they do, it's been embedded into their culture, into their everyday conversations. I think more and more you're seeing consumer demand and the public sector moving towards wanting to see food waste reduced. So as those pressures kind of come onto the private sector, I think if you traditionally didn't really care about it as a retailer, you're kind of being forced to starting to consider it. So I think it's kind of moving in the right direction. I think we'll start to see it become the norm that a retailer has a food waste mitigation plan and a prevention plan and a food rescue partner, which is super exciting. But yeah, as of right now, I think it's more of an option retailer wants to play in that space or not.
Yeah, I think you're right. The excitement and activism around food waste reduction is really growing fast, and it is really great to see, especially since we live in a culture that's relatively disconnected from food. and where it comes from. And yet we still, when we become aware of food waste in general, it still is, we still have an emotional reaction to it, and we still like, this is ridiculous. And we are putting that pressure on retailers. So that is great, and I appreciate that. You touched on currently it's optional for retailers. In France, you may have heard they made it mandatory for food retailers to donate food, and made food waste illegal, essentially. I'm wondering if you think that is a good practice, what that would look like at Blush Lane, and any challenges you could see around that process.
Yeah, that's a super interesting policy that came out of France. Of course, Europe is always, 10 steps ahead of us here. They're a role model to look to. I think it'll be a transition process, but I'd love to get to a place where throwing out food is not allowed. If you think about all the resources that went into food and all the people that can't, aren't able to, have 3 meals in the day, I think we should be looking at throwing out food as a very problematic thing. For Canada to move to that direction, I think an important step would be looking at the capacity of existing food rescue organizations like yourselves, and just seeing, are you already at capacity with accepting donations? Or based on how much food waste is being currently thrown out, if that was all diverted to an organization, would they be able to handle that amount of diverted food? Because if we don't look at that and we just switch gears, you'll just be putting the burden on the food rescue organizations that may not be able to handle it. And then we're just kind of collapsing this section of the food system that is so crucial. So maybe the transition to a ban would look like, studying the amount of food that would be diverted, and then also funding for food rescue organizations to be able to buy the infrastructure and the employees needed to be able to handle that diverted food. So I would love to see in Vancouver and the rest of Canada, but I think it'll be we should do it in stages to make sure we're doing it right.
That's wise. Yep. It would be a shock to leftover system to suddenly to have all those donations available. Honestly, it's difficult to tell how much food is being wasted here and where we operate, because we're calling people regularly looking for food that's being thrown out. And between us, the Edmonton Food Bank, Second Harvest, and a couple other food rescue organizations, things are pretty well covered in Edmonton, and yet I feel like there's still a lot of food being thrown out. So I'm really curious, and I know there's somebody doing research at the University of Alberta on food waste locally here, because we know that across Canada it's like a huge issue, and yeah, question where is food being thrown out? Do you have any perspective on that, actually, on where food might still be being wasted on either end of the supply chain?
Yeah, food waste is an interesting one because it often is kind of this hidden challenge. Even when you look into studies around food waste, there's a lot of gaps in parts of the research, because it's just, along with packaging waste as well. Businesses and organizations don't necessarily want to disclose that information, so you don't really have full visibility on what's going on. But yeah, there's massive amounts of food waste in Canada, as I'm sure you are well aware. I think more than half of our food is wasted, which is insane. When you look at it from a breakdown of who or where is it being wasted, I think the conversation often falls on the individual, as like, how are you fixing it as a person, which I think is hugely important. But if you look at the breakdown, there's a lot of food waste happening before it even gets to the customer, or before it even gets to us as the retailer. And so I think that'll take kind of policy change and innovation within the earlier stages of the supply chain to fix those problems, and less of a conversation putting the burden on the individual to fix the issue. I think it's also, as a consumer, how you can influence the points along the supply chain before you is what we often talk about of voting with your dollar. So invest in businesses that you feel are doing a good job around, whether it's food waste or, packaging or what's in their community. And then you're signaling that that's the kind of businesses you want to see operating. And I think that's like a huge piece that you can do. But yeah, food waste is we've got a lot of work to do, but it's kind of the silver lining of it is that we can make very small changes. It would make a big difference because our problem is so big. It's not like we've got a lot of low hanging fruit that we can easily fix.
Yeah.
So lots of exciting opportunities out there.
Yeah, totally. I was in another interview a couple months ago, and the person who was interviewing me was saying that food waste is like the world's most solvable problem. It's like, yeah, you have food going waste, you have people that are hungry, easy.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things that is enabling that, I think, these days is, well, one, public awareness, and two, technology. Leftovers in our app is like instrumental to coordinating this all. And for you, the metrics and the tracking you do, was not possible previously. So it's great to see technology having that role.
Yeah, definitely. And so much more will be coming out in the next little while, I'm sure. That we've seen a lot of, even SPUD.ca has recently been successful in a food waste challenge led by the government of Canada. And we've been funded to work on our initiatives around using technology to prevent food waste. So the more of that opportunity, we'll be able to really make some change.
That's fantastic. Yeah, happy to hear that.
Yeah, thank you. It's very exciting for our team.
One thing that occurred to me as I was coming into this webinar, I was wondering, and you already mentioned it almost in a way about the orchard and how they will dry fruit and sell it packaged. It's almost a method of like upcycling. When food is coming towards the end of its life, you turn it into a new product to preserve it. I'm curious, because I know Blush Lane also has like in-house kitchens of various kinds. Is there upcycling that happens within Blush Lane?
I don't actually know if we do any upcycling. I know that we do carry some brands, at least I think they're sold in Blush Lane. They might just be on SPUD. But we're trying to expand our selection of vendors that sell products with upcycled ingredients. One of my favorites is this company called Loop that creates juices out of rejected produce and like fruits and vegetables.
Right.
So they're really awesome. And yeah, a few other ones. So I wouldn't be able to answer in terms of Blush, and I don't want to say something that's not true. But we are starting to carry more vendors that are doing that, because that's another way we can kind of tackle food waste.
Awesome. Yeah, sprung that one on you, so I
yeah, sorry.
No worries, for not having an immediate response. Also curious about the accessibility portion of food, and especially the types of food that SPUD and Blush Lane have access to. And that's certainly a barrier for folks. It can be more costly. Or maybe, is that just my perception? Is that my story that it's more expensive? And are there things that we can do to make it less expensive and more accessible for people who are on a tight budget or are struggling with food insecurity?
Yeah, I think generally local, well, I would say organic food can be more expensive, or sustainably grown food can be more expensive. Or the way I like to spin it is not that it's more expensive, it's just not as cheap as unsustainably grown food. If you look at the price of something grown sustainably, they are including all the costs of how to grow something without cutting corners. So how to like pay their employees well, how to regenerate the soil, how to not degrade the environment. So that's what you're paying for, instead of cutting corners to create a very cheap piece of food. But yes, that does create a barrier for people that don't have the level of income to invest in the values that matter to them. That's why we like working with leftovers, to be able to provide good, nutritious, sustainably grown food to those that aren't able to access it through our retail stores. We also do run initiatives throughout the year, partnering with various organizations to work on poverty alleviation initiatives, whether it's through like a food security initiative. We also do a campaign every year around menstrual hygiene and people who lack access to like tampons, pads, liners, and things like that. So we do a lot of partnerships to try to like fill that gap, but it's definitely a challenge within the food system of how do we include everyone to be able to practice or invest in the values that matter to them.
Yeah, it's challenging and complex. I have a question here from Kira. Instead of relying on charitable capacity to redirect food waste, do you think grocery stores already have the infrastructure, trucks, staffing resources to be making these donations to charities themselves? Obviously, I don't want to cut leftovers out, so Kira's a great employee of leftovers. But if it really just comes down to a question of scale, can the grocery store be better using their existing resources to take responsibility for the food waste they're creating?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think grocery stores probably do have, capacity to support charitable partners in more ways than just saying, come by these days with your truck picking it up. I think for a lot of retailers, if it's not a part of their culture, their identity to really work on food waste, then it's an incentive to make collecting food waste as simple as possible. So if you're saying to the retailer, you have to deliver it to this location and you have to provide the cold storage on the way there, and just adding complications, it inhibits a retailer's willingness to deal with their food waste. As frustrating as that answer is, if you make it super easy for them to divert their food waste, you will see a greater participation in doing so. But yeah, I think we all can, give more than what we currently do, and work towards solutions that work for both the partner and the retailer.
Yeah, it's a challenging one. You could say it's just, the nature of business that you're short on time and don't have the resources to focus on donating. And then there's the other argument that, you could run with Kira's comment and say, no, that's yours. Just like extended producer responsibility, it's the grocery store's responsibility to not waste this product. And in the meantime, Leftovers is certainly happy to help. Yeah, but a complicated relationship there.
I think the alternative is like they could just throw it out for no charge, no disapproval. It's a hard kind of, what we were talking about earlier, if the government was to implement some sort of penalty, for lack of a better word, of throwing out your food, maybe you'd see that shift of a retailer willing to put more effort into moving their unsellable food.
And actually, occasionally we do get that. I remember there was a donation that came in from Saputo, like the great big dairy producer, and they did drop off a pallet of, what was it? It was a really fun one. Mint mocha coffee creamer or something like that. It was their Christmas variety that wasn't selling anymore, and so they had to donate it. But yeah, occasionally they will drop it off if they have a truck going by anyways. We have another question from somebody at Leftovers. When you're talking about a culture of food sustainability, is that something that comes from management first, or is it employee driven?
I'd say it's both. With the culture of our company, it's really like, if you have an idea, bring it forward. My position is more just like manage ideas that come in and support the execution of projects. But sustainability is like a job role, we say it kind of sits with everyone. So it does come from leadership, looking to see how we can stay ahead as sustainability is trending in all different ways around food waste and packaging and everything in between. We want to, if we're going to stay as kind of sustainability branded and want to keep talking about how we're a leader in this space, we got to keep staying a leader. So the leadership team is always looking for like what's new and what aren't people doing, and then other employees are also kind of bringing those ideas to the table, or they say like, I volunteer in this space, can we support this initiative? So it's really a team effort, and I just kind of help support those ideas when they come through.
Sounds like overall a good culture that Blush Lane's done well on developing.
Definitely. I think it's they've brought in really good people, which has helped move a lot of the things along.
All right. Well, it seems like we don't have any questions at the moment. What has become a custom for the WastED webinar is to end with some accordion music, which is super fun.
This is amazing.
The COVID shot in the arm isn't really helping me play accordion these days, though, I gotta say. Just a short little diddly. Shameless self-promotion. That's a song from an album that I just released with my brothers called Gathering Change, and it's available on all your platforms. Thanks very much for attending, folks. Thanks very much, Michelle, for sticking with us and really diving into Blush Lane, sustainability, and food waste. It was very informative, and yeah, really appreciate it. And huge shout out to Blush Lane for being fantastic partners over the years. And thanks you all for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was super nice talking to you and sharing a bit about our shared passions.
Awesome. That's all for now, folks. Talk to you next time.